Henry V is the tankiest archer commander in Rise of Kingdoms. There is no doubt about it. And today, I'll be updating my Henry in-depth guide, telling you his best pairs, skills, talents, equipment, everything you'd ever need to know about him. So if you're interested in Henry V in an updated in-depth guide, maybe you want to invest in him, maybe you want to use him on the open field, this is going to be the best video, and you definitely want to stick around till the end. Now, before we dive into Henry's skills, I will also say, like I said in the other video, I am still a bit sick. I'm getting better, but my voice is definitely worse today than it was then because my nose is completely blocked. But I will still try and get this video done. So if my voice is weird, that's why. But other than that, let's just get into the skills. And we'll start off with Henry's active skill. This allows him to deal direct damage to a target troop, 2,300, which is a decent single target. And then for the next 5 seconds, he will take 30% less skill damage. This skill is really self-explanatory. It's just a good amount of single target damage with a very decent buff. That's all it is. You probably want Henry as the primary. I mean, you definitely do want Henry as the primary, just because you want to get this skill damage reduction off before your opponents can get their active skill off, so that you do take the reduced skill damage. It should be noted, though, that is kind of outdated nowadays compared to some of the newer, especially infantry commanders who are dealing smite damage, because that skill damage reduction is going to do just about nothing against them. So that used to be much stronger. It isn't as good now in the current meta. But that being said, it's still a decent skill. It's good against AoEs that might hit you. It's good against cavs. It's good against older infantry and newer archer marchers. So it is still a pretty tanky active skill, and it's going to help you get a nice little bit of tankiness and a better trade on the open field. Moving on to the second skill here, and this is mainly a stat skill. There are a lot of stats on this. Basically, Henry's going to get 20% attack and 20% defense, which is very, very nice. It's 40% stats, cut and dry at all times. And then when he's outside of your alliance territory, he'll also gain 20% march speed, which is again very nice, especially for the open field. 20% march speed is really good. Keep in mind though, it's off your main alliance territory. So if you're fighting on your own alliance territory, you won't get such a good buff. You have to be either fighting off your alliance territory, like in this area, or fighting on enemy alliance territory, since that still counts as off territory. So keep that in mind. It is not a permanent 20% march speed buff. That would obviously be much stronger. It is only while he is off territory. Moving on to the third skill, this is a rally skill. If this commander's troop is attacking a city or stronghold, he'll deal 30% more counterattack, which is really, really nice to just deal to your opponents, especially if you're being swarmed. Gives him a nice bit of anti-swarm. And whenever he launches a basic attack, 10% chance to increase the skill damage the target receives by 30% for 3 seconds. That is a very nice, really buff or debuff to be giving your opponent inside a passive skill slot, and it's pretty common. You'll probably get this once every 10 turns in the worst situation, so that is a good thing to have. This is going to mean that your rally itself will deal more damage, and you're also allowing yourself to boost your swarming marchers and let them deal more damage as well. Not to mention, it will stack with Boudica Prime, because hers is an active skill, and Henry's is in that third skill slot, so it is a passive skill. So that is a very nice rally skill. Obviously, Henry is a decent rally. We'll talk about that later, but this is just a good archer rally skill overall. Moving on to Henry's fourth skill, this commander's archer units deal 10% more damage, which just means they deal 10% more normal damage, because whenever it's got a specific unit, it's not all damage, it's just normal damage. And then whenever he's hit with a basic attack, 10% chance to deal direct damage 800 to the attacker, cooldown of 5 seconds. Again, this is really good anti-swarm. There's also a bit of cheesing you can do in the open field with this, and it is just a nice bit of revenge damage in general. So if you're fighting normally and someone hits your Henry, not only are you going to be tanky from that active skill and the expertise, which we'll talk about soon, you'll also be dealing a bunch of direct damage back to your opponent, pretty much making it so that they take damage for just hitting you. Not to mention, if you're in a rally, you're dealing more counterattack and a bunch of other anti-swarm. He is really one of the tankiest anti-swarm archers out there, who's literally just dealing damage as a way of stopping your opponents from swarming you. Moving on finally to Henry's expertise. If he's got over 70% rage, he'll deal 30% more damage. That's just the first part of it. And then if he's not over 70% rage, he'll take 20% less normal damage. Again, this is a tanky skill, or it is just a skill about dealing more damage. It's a very, very nice skill. The fact you're taking 20% less normal damage is really, really good against smite commanders. And again, if you're a primary commander here, if you can get your active skill off before your opponents get theirs off, you will have a 20% normal damage reduction. So if Henry throws his active skill, it'll bring him down to 0 rage. he'll get that 20% less normal damage, and then if a Leo Chair through their active skill, you're taking way less normal damage. So that's a good thing, especially in the Smite meta, and it's going to make him quite powerful and sustainable. So now that we've gone over Henry's skills, what can I say would be the most optimal skill level for him? And there are really 3 things we should note. First of all, if you're using him in a rally, expertise him, there's no question asked. And if he's not expertise, don't rally with him. Simple as that. He needs to be expertise to rally with him, especially in a KVK. There would be no KVK, even if you're in a DC dead KVK, where you wouldn't rally with a expertise commander. The other option is if you already have Henry at this skill level, I would keep him there. So if you got Henry at 5.5, I'd probably just keep him at that level. There's no point really investing further into him, just because of the fact that Henry is not the most new and meta commander, and I wouldn't be putting tons of gold into him. Again, I'll talk about his investment potential a little bit later, but really nowadays, if you're going to run him on the open field, I would probably still expertise him just because he needs that extra expertise skill. He needs the extra reductions and extra damage he gets out of it. Otherwise, he just isn't going to be able to keep up with some of these stronger commanders out there, such as the new infantry and their strong smite meta, or the cavalry commanders like Hauche Bing, and even commanders such as Belisarius, who are going to inflict massive debuffs. So Henry really does need that expertise to be a good performing commander nowadays. Without it, he's not going to perform nearly as well. A year ago, I would have said that a 5.5/1.5 Henry is perfectly fine. Nowadays, it's like barely usable, so I wouldn't really go 5.5/1.5. There are definitely much stronger options out there. Now, as for the talents on Henry, before we go over the commander pairings, this is really the main tree I run. I rally with this tree, I fight on the open field with this tree. It's usually just the best one. You go up all the way into the Archer tree down to Whistling Arrows. You get 2 out of 3 on Razor Sharp, 3 out of 3 on Rejuvenate, 3 out of 3 on Loose Formation, and then you get 3 out of 3 on Buckler Shield. I always do say 3 out of 3 on Rejuvenate is worth it, because even if you get 20 more Rage instead of 150 Rage, it is still worth those 3 points in my opinion. So hitting the Rage cap is always better than not hitting the Rage cap, which is why having 3 out of 3 is very good. Only time you could maybe reconsider this if you're running him with a Rage Cannon commander who's going to give you more Rage, then maybe you could drop the Rejuvenate. So someone like YSG, you could consider dropping Rejuvenate, and that is an option, but personally, I still do run it, even with my Henry YSG. So this would really just be Henry's build for any commander pairing, anytime you're rallying with him. This is pretty much what I'd run. Maybe for rallying, there is a slightly more optimized build, but that's something you would have to look into, just because I'm not a main rallying player. But to my knowledge, this build would work fine for rallying as well, and I've personally used it to rally, albeit in Ark of Osiris, but I have used this build to rally before, and I guess I have used it a few times in KVKs, but those were lower seed KVKs. That being said though, you could definitely get away with a build like this for rallying. It'll work fine. You've got good counter attack, Henry's already tanky, you're taking less skill damage in Loose Formation, and then you've just got all around decent damage on the Archer tree and good rage, basically sustainability through the Rejuvenate. As for Henry's commander pairings, he's a really versatile commander for the open field. He works with pretty much anybody. He can work with Boudica, he can work with Herman, he can work with a Shobanipal, he can work with Zulang. He works with just about anyone. But for most people, I'd recommend running Henry only for a third march, and that's why I would say Henry's best pairing is probably with a YSG. YSG is a very good Archer commander, only when you're looking at 3 marches. For your top 2 Archer marches, you wouldn't run YSG, and you really wouldn't run a Henry either. So Henry's best pairing is YSG without a doubt, just because they've got a lot of synergy. YSG is a rage engine. Because Henry has the support tree, you kind of need him to be a rage engine. Otherwise, what's going to happen is that he's not going to get enough initial rage, and you're going to lose your rage bar whenever you're in an open field fight, unless you're getting a lot of rage chaining. So YSG really necessary for Henry to be a good rage engine, especially initially. And then YSG's just got good skill damage and is also dealing AoE. Plus, YSG needs a tanky, defense-heavy, and also slightly fast commander, and Henry fulfills those roles. He's very tanky, he's slightly defense-heavy, you don't really want to hit him, he's got revenge damage, so he's going to work with YSG. He's your tanking upfront commander, he's the thing that people see, and then you've got your YSG, who's just that really big nuisance commander who's dealing AoE damage. From personal experience, people actually do tend to swarm Henry. I've seen a lot of times, if I'm ever in a small murderable fight, people will swarm my Henry before they swarm my Zulang, because they think Henry is a very weak and easy killable commander, but he's just not. He's going to really allow your YSG to get some damage in, even if he won't get the best trade, because he is your tanking commander. you'll notice that even if your Home Rule goes down, your Zulang and your Herman or your Nevsky Joan, those marches are going to get really good trades because they swarm the Henry first. So I always love when people swarm my Henry first. It's obviously never going to trade very good when it gets 5x swarmed, but it is going to get a better trade than a Zulang Herman would if it got 5x swarmed right out the gate. So Henry with YSG, it's a good march. It's very annoying to deal with. It's tanky with good damage. It's pretty much the quintessential principal march you want. It's got a tanky commander with a DPS dealer and a rage engine. It'll do fine on the open field. One other option, which is a bit more niche, and if you don't have Cyrus, I wouldn't do it, is a Henry Cyrus. I've run this march a bit. I've messed around with it. It's fun because it's really fast, and it's just got a ton of revenge damage. So if you're sitting outside a city, or you're sitting in a city and there's around 10 marches out there, if you jumped out with a Henry Cyrus and you just let them hit you and you run away instantly, you have a chance of dealing just ridiculous instant damage. It's not even funny. It's more than Alexander the Great deals between all of Henry and Cyrus's active skills. Now, you do need to get a bit lucky. Sometimes you won't get a good trade, but from personal experience, it's an annoying march. It's a very funny march to run, and if you have a Cyrus, it's the only way to even get value out of him nowadays. So Cyrus with Henry, it's fun to use. You can definitely get away with it, and it's just another option you can use with him besides the main meta commanders of Zulang, Boudica, Herman, and Ashobani Powell. So Henry's best two non-meta pairings, they'd be like YSG with Cyrus and also maybe a Nebuchadnezzar. As for rally pairings for Henry, there's only two options. You've got a Shobani Pal and you've got a Nebuchadnezzar. Nebu only if you want a really anti-swarm rally, and even nowadays it's not the best. So mainly I'd be looking at a Shobani Pal for open field, for rallying situations. That's probably the best march to be using. It's going to trade the best. It's going to get the best anti-swarm with good DPS from a Shobani Pal, so it is the better option. You can also run a Henry Zulang rally, but that is a bit outdated. I'd rather run in a Shobani Pal Zulang or in a Shobani Pal Herman. Henry doesn't have the best synergy with Herman for rallying, which is why I'd stick with a Shobani Pal Hermans instead of running the Henry Herman rally. It's just not as good. There's a little bit of a weird situation there where Shobani Pal benefits more because he's going to allow you to deal extra active skills on Herman Prime. So I would definitely much rather running the Henry with anyone besides Herman as the main rally. Just as a couple of quick notes as well before we discuss Henry's investment potential, there are a few more ways to access him than there used to be. He's no longer Mightiest Governor exclusive. You can get him out of the Legendary Tavern, which is nice if you are looking to invest in a Henry and use him on the open field or in a rally. You can get a couple of free heads out of these chests, and he's also available in the daily special offer. So that is another easy way to access Henry. So if you need to get Henry, those are probably the two main ways besides the Mightiest Governor, and he's definitely not the best MGE commander. So if you want Henry, you can get him in Legendary Tavern, and you can also access him inside of the daily special offer as one of the commanders there. There is another note we should go with Henry though, is in terms of accessories. One thing he really benefits from, especially if you don't have a YSG, is a Ring of Doom. Sorry, not a Ring of Doom, a Horn of Fury. I've even noticed that with YSG, a Horn of Fury on my Henry still does pretty good, and it's going to allow him, again, to get his active skill off first initially, which means he's going to get a better trade, and B, it's going to allow him to rev up his support tree a bit quicker, and allow him to rage chain a little bit better. So Henry, with a Horn of Fury, even if you do have a YSG, I find is still pretty good, and it's just going to be a nice thing to have on the open field. You don't need it if you have YSG, but if you don't have a YSG, you 100% need a Horn of Fury, otherwise Henry is not going to do nearly as well because his rage is going to be too slow, or you're just not even going to get the active skill off because you have to leave combat before you get that active skill. So Horn of Fury, easily one of the best accessories for Henry, almost essential in my opinion, and then you could go with Ring of Doom, or you could go with Dagger, or Mora's Web. All of those are definitely sensible, but Horn of Fury is essential no matter what. So now the final thing I'd like to talk about with Henry is whether or not you should even consider investing in him. And I think the answer nowadays is pretty much just a blunt no. Unless you already have Henry expertise, I don't see why you would put extra gold heads in him. He's not the most meta commander. You should never really backwards invest in Rise of Kingdoms. And while he is a cool commander, I've used him for many years. I've gotten my value out of him. I've had him expertise since 2023. It's been over a year now, and I recruited him in 2023 as well, basically at the start of the year. So when we think about it, my Henry, he's been through the whole 9 yards. He's got 11 million kills, which is a lot for my account. I've used him at 5511. I've used him at 5515. He's been through the whole 9 yards for me. So unless you are really, really keen on using Henry, I wouldn't really invest in him. And even if you were keen, I'd recommend just waiting either for the new archers, which are around the corner, or just getting a better commander who's more modern and newer. So even someone like William Wallace or Belisarius Prime would be a better investment over Henry. Henry is still a cool commander. He's just not that meta commander anymore. As Shirbanipal is a better MGE commander if anyone's getting an archer MGE. There are just a lot of better options over Henry. So Henry, he's fun and cool, but he's definitely not my number one pick for an investment. Maybe as a rally, he's still pretty good with his Shirbanipal, but otherwise, I wouldn't be getting him. And if you've got a Shirbanipal, you've probably got Henry anyways. So I don't think it really matters what I say. But Henry, not your number one investment nowadays. He's good on the field. He still trades decently for me. He's probably my second best performing, a little bit sometimes outperforming Boudica, but he is just not the number one commander in the game by any means, and he's not worth all those gold heads even nowadays. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, I just want to ask you guys to please consider subscribing to the channel. It's a very small thing that allows me to keep making videos, and it really does support me, and it's very much appreciated. So if you enjoyed this Archer guide and you made it all the way to the end, subscribing is one of the best ways to show your appreciation for the video, and I also very much appreciate it as well. Not to mention, I'm going to be making Archer guides for the new Archer commanders coming soon. I'm of course going to expertise them, because what Archer channel would I be without expertising both of them? So if you want first-hand experience of the two new Archer commanders with their mighty heal and true damage, this will be the best channel to subscribe to, since I literally expertise Herman within 2 minutes of his release. So if you want to see the same thing happen, actually 3 minutes, if you want to see the same thing happen with these new Archer commanders, subscribe to make it possible, and it is very much appreciated. Now I just want to say thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.